The son of a single mother began studying at the same school as the daughter of a billionaire when secrets came to light and their lives changed forever. A story of destiny and love that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment on where you are watching from. The March sun still carried the sticky warmth of the New York summer when Sarah Johnson adjusted the strap of her worn-out bag for the 10th time and looked at the imposing building in front of her. St. Teresa Academy rose like a fortress of exposed bricks and mirrored glass in the heart of the Upper East Side, its Gothic towers contrasting with the modern skyscrapers that dominated the skyline. At 38 years old, 7 months pregnant, and with Ethan by her side, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility tighten her chest like a vice. "Mom, are you sure this is the place?" Ethan asked, his brown eyes wide as he observed the luxury cars parked in double rows in front of the school. A golden Porsche was vying for space with a black BMW, while uniformed drivers patiently waited beside their vehicles. "I am, my love." Sarah squeezed her son's small hand, feeling the cold sweat in his palms. "You earned this scholarship through your own hard work. Remember the tests you did so well on?" Ethan nodded, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. The new uniform, bought with such sacrifice that Sarah had eaten only bread with margarine for a week, seemed too big on his skinny shoulders. The navy blue trousers were perfectly pressed, the blazer without a single loose thread, yet he looked like a small bird trying to hide among eagles. Sarah took a deep breath, the movement making her round belly protrude even more under the dark knit dress she had sewn, especially for the occasion. It was simple yet elegant, with impeccable seams that revealed her professional skill. She had spent 2 entire nights working on it after her double shifts in the garment district. "Good morning," the cheerful voice made them turn. A black woman in her 50s, her grey hair pulled into a flawless bun, approached with a genuine smile. Her blue blazer bore a golden brooch with the school's emblem. "You must be the Johnsons. I'm Secretary Grace. Principal Helen is expecting you." Relief washed over Sarah as she noted the cordiality in the greeting. "Thank you so much. This is Ethan, my son." "What a handsome boy." Grace crouched down to be at Ethan's level. "You're going to love studying here. Did you know we have the best library in New York?" Ethan's eyes finally sparkled. "I really like reading. Then you two are going to get along very well." Grace winked at him before turning to Sarah. "Shall we? Miss Helen is eager to meet you." As they walked through the polished marble hallways, Sarah noticed every detail. Portraits of former principals adorned the walls, interspersed with sports and academic trophies that gleamed under the crystal chandelier lights. The floor softly echoed their footsteps, muffled by the Persian rug running down the center of the main corridor. "Mom, look!" Ethan discreetly pointed to a display case filled with medals. "Math Olympiad, National Writing Contest. Wow!" "You can win medals like that too," Sarah whispered, but her voice carried more hope than conviction. Each step in that environment made her feel like an imposter, a seamstress from the garment district, intruding into a world she didn't belong to. The principal's office door was made of solid wood, with hand-carved details. Grace knocked gently before opening. "Miss Helen, the Johnsons have arrived." The principal rose from behind a mahogany desk that seemed to have witnessed decades of history. Helen Carter was about 60 years old, with white hair cut in a modern bob and piercing blue eyes behind elegant glasses. Her understated dress and simple pearl necklace conveyed authority without ostentation. "Sarah, Ethan!" She walked around the desk with her arms outstretched. "What a pleasure to finally meet you in person." Sarah immediately felt at ease with the principal's firm handshake. There was no condescension. In her eyes, only genuine interest. "Thank you for this opportunity, Miss Helen. Ethan is very excited." "And you, Ethan? How are you feeling? Helen crouched down to be at the boy's level, just as Grace had done. A little nervous, Ethan admitted, his cheeks flushing, but also excited. My mom said there are really good teachers here. We do. And do you know why you earned this scholarship? Helen waited for Ethan to shake his head. Because your writing test was the best I've read in 15 years of being a principal. You wrote about how you help your mom in the sewing shop and how that taught you about teamwork. It was beautiful. Sarah felt her eyes welling up with tears. Ethan had written about her, about the weekends he spent in the shop while she worked, organizing threads by color and helping with small tasks. She didn't know he had chosen that theme. Ms. Helen, Sarah discreetly wiped her eyes, I want to make it clear that even with the scholarship, we will do our part. If Ethan needs extra materials, an additional uniform— Sarah, Helen gently interrupted, placing her hand on the mother's arm. A full scholarship means exactly that. Ethan earned his place here on his own merits. Our job now is to ensure he has all the tools to shine. But if there are expensive field trips or— Everything is covered. Helen smiled. What we need from you is commitment. Ethan, do you promise to dedicate yourself to your studies? I promise. The response came so quickly that it drew laughter from the three women. And you, Sarah, do you promise to trust us? I know it's not easy to leave your child at a new school, especially being so different from our world, Sarah completed, her raw honesty surprising even herself. Helen nodded. Exactly, but different doesn't mean inferior. Ethan has something that many of our students lack. Students have lost humility, determination, and respect for others. These qualities are rare and precious. A gentle knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Grace appeared again. Ms. Helen, Mr. Miller is here. He said it was urgent. Sarah noticed how Helen's expression subtly changed, a shadow of concern crossing her face before she regained her professional composure. Ethan, how about we check out your classroom? Helen stood up. Sarah, you can join us. Mr. Miller's meeting can wait a few minutes. As they walked down the hallway toward the educational wing, Sarah whispered, Is there a serious problem? Helen sighed almost imperceptibly. Edward Miller, let's just say he's a very involved father. Sometimes too involved. Is he a student's father? Sophia, a lovely girl. But Edward— Helen stopped in front of a door with a golden plaque. 4th grade B, Ms. Johnson. He has difficulty accepting that he can't control every aspect of his daughter's life, and our school values student autonomy. Sarah nodded, but her mind was already elsewhere. Through the hallway window, she could see the playground where uniformed children played during recess. They all seemed so confident, so belonging to that world of privilege. How would Ethan fit in there? Mom, Ethan tugged at her sleeve. Is everything okay? Sarah looked at her son, his intelligent eyes, his worried expression that was too old for his 8 years, and felt a wave of determination sweep away her doubts. Everything is perfect, my love. Shall we check out your new classroom? Helen smiled and opened the door, revealing a spacious, bright room where 20 children were working in pairs. Ms. Johnson, a young woman with curly hair held back by a colorful clip, approached with a warm smile. Ethan, so glad you're here. We have a special spot waiting for you. As she watched her son being introduced to his new classmates, Sarah felt a mix of pride and fear tighten her heart. This was just the first day of a journey that would change both their lives forever. She just had no idea how much. 3 weeks had passed since Ethan's first day at St. Teresa Academy, and Sarah could already notice subtle changes in her son's behavior. He came home with stories about science labs, music classes, and a library that seemed straight out of a movie. But he also returned quieter, with a thoughtful air that she couldn't quite decipher. "Ethan, how was gym class today?" Sarah asked while preparing dinner in the tiny kitchen of their two-room apartment in Brooklyn. The smell of chili, seasoned with garlic and onion, filled the cramped space, mingling with the aroma of rice bubbling in the pressure cooker. "It was fun," Ethan replied, but he didn't look up from the notebook where he was drawing with worn-out colored pencils. "Ms. Smith said, 'I have a knack for track and field,'" Sarah smiled, stirring the pot with a wooden spoon. 8 months pregnant, every movement required extra effort, but she refused to show fatigue in front of her son. "That's great. And your classmates? Have you made any friends?" The silence that followed was eloquent. Ethan continued coloring, now with more force, the red pencil scratching the paper with unnecessary intensity. "Ethan? Some boys, they say things," he finally murmured, not lifting his head. Sarah turned off the stove and approached, her hands still damp from washing the dishes. "What kind of things?" "They ask where my dad works, and when I say I don't have a dad..." Ethan stopped coloring, the pencil hovering over the paper. "Then they ask how you managed to get me into an expensive school if you just sew clothes." Sarah's heart tightened. She pulled up a chair and sat beside her son, ignoring the back pain that her advanced pregnancy intensified. "And what do you say?" "That I got a scholarship because I'm smart." Ethan finally looked at her, his dark eyes shining with a determination that surprised her. "But they laugh. They say being a scholarship student is almost like a favor." Sarah gently held her son's chin. "Ethan, look at me. You're not there because of anyone's favor. You earned that spot because you're brilliant, dedicated, and have a good heart. If some boys can't see that, the problem isn't yours." "But, Mom..." Ethan hesitated, clearly struggling with something bigger. "What if they're right? What if I don't belong there?" Before Sarah could respond, the phone rang. It was an old desk phone that she had inherited from her grandmother and that insisted on working despite the years. The call was from the school. "Ms. Sarah, this is Grace, the secretary. Ms. Helen would like to speak with you tomorrow, if possible. It will be the parent-teacher conference." Sarah agreed, but when she hung up, a familiar anxiety settled in her stomach. Parent-teacher conference. It meant another day of lost work at the shop, but more importantly, it meant exposure. Being among those well-dressed parents, with their imported cars and conversations about international travel. The next day, Sarah arrived at the school wearing her best outfit, a tailored skirt and blazer that she had sewn based on a fashion magazine. The fabric was simple, but the cut was impeccable, showcasing her professional skill. Even so, upon seeing the other mothers with their designer bags and discreet but expensive jewelry, she felt like an unprepared actress trying to play a role she didn't master. The meeting took place in the school auditorium, an elegant setting with navy blue velvet upholstered chairs and a polished wooden stage. Sarah chose a seat in the middle, trying not to draw attention, but noticed how some glances evaluated her discreetly. "Good morning, parents and guardians." Miss Helen stepped onto the stage with a welcoming smile. "Today we will talk about the academic and social development of our fourth-grade students." During the presentation, Sarah tried to focus on the principal's words about pedagogical methodologies and cognitive development. But her attention was scattered by the whispered comments around her. "That must be the scholarship student's mother," she heard a female voice behind her. "Poor thing, so young and already expecting a second," replied another voice, with a tone that mixed pity and judgment. Sarah felt her face heat up, but she kept her eyes fixed in front of her. She had faced prejudice before, a single mother, seamstress, living in the outskirts. But something about this environment amplified every glance, every whisper. "Now we will move on to the individual meetings," announced Helen. "Each family will have 15 minutes with the responsible teacher." Sarah waited her turn in the hallway, observing the other families. Executive parents were constantly checking their phones. Mothers discussed extracurricular activity schedules that cost more than her monthly salary. A child was quietly crying because she had forgotten her violin at home while her mother spoke on the phone about rearranging her personal trainer's schedule. "Sarah Johnson." Miss Johnson appeared at the classroom door. "Please come in." The teacher's lounge was cozy, with light wood-paneled walls and shelves filled with children's books. Sarah sat in a chair that seemed designed for someone smaller than her long legs awkwardly folding. "Ethan is an exceptional child," Miss Johnson began, opening a folder with the boy's work. "Just look at this essay about the water cycle. The creativity in the approach is remarkable." Sarah read the text, recognizing her son's neat handwriting. He had created a story in which a raindrop told of its adventures from the rain to the sea, passing through rivers and soil. It was imaginative and scientifically accurate. "Academically, he is among the top 3 in the class," Miss Johnson continued. "But—" Sarah felt her stomach tighten. "But socially, he is still adjusting. Some classmates, well, children can be cruel without realizing it. Ethan sometimes isolates himself during recess. He told me they make comments about our situation." Ms. Johnson nodded gravely. "Unfortunately, some parents pass their prejudices onto their children. We are addressing this in class, with activities on diversity and respect for differences." "Ms. Johnson," Sarah leaned forward, her hands clasped over her round belly. "I know our world is different. Ethan knows that, too. But does he deserve to be here?" "He not only deserves to be here, but to shine here," Ms. Johnson replied firmly. "Ethan has something that many of those boys have lost: authenticity. He doesn't pretend to be someone he's not." At that moment, a vigorous knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Ms. Johnson frowned and went to answer. "Mr. Edward, your meeting is at 3:30. "I know, but I need to talk about yesterday's incident." The male voice was deep, with an authoritative tone that brooked no contradiction. "Sophia came home crying." Sarah discreetly turned and saw a tall man entering the room. Edward Miller was about 40 years old, with dark hair streaked with silver at the temples, dressed in a navy suit that likely cost more than her annual rent. His eyes were a deep blue, but carried a hardness that suggested someone used to getting what he wanted. He stopped upon noticing Sarah's presence, clearly not expecting to find anyone else there. "Sorry for the intrusion," he said, but his tone sounded anything but apologetic. "I didn't know you were busy." "Mr. Edward, this is Sarah Johnson, Ethan's mother." Ms. Johnson made the formal introduction. "Sarah, this is Edward Miller, Sophia's father." Edward quickly assessed her, from the simple blazer to the flat shoes she wore to accommodate her swollen pregnancy feet. Sarah felt analyzed again, catalogued, and it irritated her. "Nice to meet you," she said, extending her hand. Edward shook her hand briefly. "Likewise. Ethan is the new boy, right? The scholarship student?" The way he said scholarship student, not with disdain, but as if identifying a different category, made Sarah stiffen. "That's right. And Sophia is your daughter?" "Yes. A sensitive girl." Edward chose his words carefully. "That's why I worry when she comes home upset." Miss Johnson interjected, "Mr. Edward, yesterday's incident has been resolved. The children were discussing different types of housing during social studies class, and some comments were inappropriate. We spoke with the entire class." "What kind of comments?" Sarah asked, a disturbing suspicion beginning to form. "Well," Ms. Johnson hesitated, Some students made remarks about socio-economic differences. Sophia defended Ethan when a boy said that a small apartment wasn't a real home. Sarah felt her blood rush to her face. Edward, in turn, seemed genuinely surprised. Sophia defended the boy? Yes, Miss Johnson confirmed. She said that the size of the house doesn't matter, that what matters is the love inside it. It was quite touching, actually. An awkward silence followed. Sarah stared at her hands, trying to process that a 9-year-old girl had defended her son better than she could at that moment. "Mr. Edward," she finally said, her voice controlled but firm, "I appreciate your daughter defending Ethan, but I hope this doesn't cause problems for her at home." Edward studied her more closely this time, noticing the dignity in her upright posture, the intelligence in her direct gaze. "Why would it cause problems?" "Because," Sarah stood up, her impressive height even with her pregnant belly, "I know how it works. Parents like you don't want your children associating with families like ours." "Parents like me?" Edward's voice had a dangerous tone. Rich, powerful, used to controlling who their children associate with. Edward stepped forward, and Sarah could smell the expensive cologne, but also something more, a tension that was not just anger. "Miss Sarah," he said, his voice low but clear, "you don't know me well enough to make that judgment. And you don't know my family well enough to allow comments about our home." Two of them locked eyes for a moment that felt eternal. Miss Johnson watched them, clearly uncomfortable with the tension in the air. "Perhaps," Edward finally said, "we should get to know each other better before jumping to conclusions." Sarah blinked, surprised by the unexpected proposal. "What are you suggesting?" "A coffee. A civilized conversation about our children and how we can help them adapt better." Sarah hesitated. Every instinct told her that Edward Miller represented a kind of complication she didn't need in her life. But the image of Sophia defending Ethan, a rich girl choosing to side with a scholarship student, made her reconsider. "All right," she finally said, "but let it be clear, I don't need charity or protection. I just want our children to have a healthy school environment." Edward smiled for the first time since entering the room, and Sarah noticed how it completely transformed his stern face. "Perfect. Because for your information, Miss Sarah, I don't give charity either, and something tells me you are the kind of person who earns things on your own merit." As she left the school that afternoon, Sarah wondered if she had just made an ally or an enemy. Edward Miller was clearly a man used to getting what he wanted, but there was something in his eyes when she confronted him. Respect? Curiosity? One thing was certain, her life had just become complicated in a way she could never have predicted. The morning coffee at Edward Miller's house always followed a meticulously planned ritual. At exactly 7 o'clock, Ms. Roberts, the family's housekeeper for nearly 2 decades, served fresh orange juice, scrambled eggs with Gruyere cheese, and whole-grain toast on a glass table that reflected the morning light from the penthouse apartment in the Upper East Side. Sophia Miller, 9 years old, always sat in the same chair, the second from the right, where she could see both her father and the panoramic view of New York City through the floor-to-ceiling windows. However, on this April morning she barely touched her food, her dark eyes lost in the distant buildings. "Sophia, you haven't eaten anything," Edward observed, lowering the tablet where he was reading the morning financial news. He wore a white linen shirt and dark dress pants, the uniform of a businessman who controlled one of the largest construction companies in the state. "I'm not hungry, Dad," Sophia replied quietly, stirring the eggs on her plate without bringing them to her mouth. Ms. Roberts approached with a cup of coffee for Edward, her footsteps silent on the marble floor. She was a robust woman, 62 years old, with grey hair always neatly tied in a bun, and brown eyes that missed nothing. She had raised Sophia since she was a baby and knew every expression of the girl. "What's wrong, princess?" Ms. Roberts bent down beside Sophia's chair, speaking in the affectionate tone she reserved only for her. "Did you have a fight with a friend at school?" Sophia shook her head, but Edward noticed how she avoided the housekeeper's gaze. "Sophia," Edward set down the tablet and focused entirely on his daughter. "Did something happen yesterday that I should know about?" The girl finally looked up, and Edward saw a sadness that alarmed him. Sophia had always been a serious child, but this melancholy was different. "Dad, why do some people think that having money makes someone better than others?" The question caught Edward off guard. He exchanged a quick glance with Ms. Roberts, who frowned. "Why are you asking this, sweetheart?" Sophia sighed, a sound too heavy for someone her age. "Yesterday in class, Ms. Johnson was talking about different types of housing. She showed pictures of houses, apartments, townhouses." Edward waited, sensing there was more. "Then Ryan said that a small apartment isn't a real house, that only a big house with a backyard is a real house." Sophia paused, playing with her fork. And Emily laughed and said that poor people live in small apartments because they have no choice. "And what did you do?" Edward asked, though he already imagined the answer from his daughter's tone. "I said they were wrong, that Ethan lives in a small apartment with his mum, but it must be full of love. That size doesn't matter." Ms. Roberts smiled, a glimmer of pride in her eyes. "Well done, Sophia. You were brave. But then," Sophia continued, her voice dropping even lower, "Ryan said I was only defending him because I feel sorry for Ethan. That rich people always feel sorry for poor people." Edward felt something constrict in his chest. "And how did you feel when he said that?" "Angry," Sophia replied with an intensity that surprised both her father and Ms. Roberts. "Ethan is smart, Dad. He knows things that no one else in the class knows. He explained to me why plants need different types of soil and how his mom makes beautiful clothes just by looking at a picture." "How do you know that?" Edward asked, curious. "Because I talked to him during recess," Sophia admitted, as if confessing a crime. "He sits alone in the library, so I go there. He showed me some amazing books about stars." Edward processed this information. Sophia, who had always been shy and selective with friendships, was willingly seeking the company of the scholarship student. "And how did Ethan react to Ryan's comments?" "He turned red and left the room," Sophia replied, her voice heavy with guilt. "I ran after him, but he said he was used to it and that I didn't need to get involved." Miss Roberts straightened, her hands resting on her hips in a gesture Edward knew well. It meant she was outraged. "What a rude boy that Ryan is," she murmured. "His parents should teach him respect." Edward remained silent for a few seconds, recalling the tense conversation with Sarah Johnson at school. The woman had confronted him directly, without fear or reverence, defending her world with a dignity that had impressed him. And now he was discovering that his daughter was developing a genuine friendship with her son. "Sophia," he finally said, "do you want to keep being friends with Ethan?" "I do." The answer came immediately and determined. "He is nice to me, Dad. He doesn't try to impress me or ask to come over because it's pretty. He just talks to me normally." Edward felt a pang. How many of Sophia's friendships were based on interest in her family's wealth? "So, let's do this," he decided. "You will continue being friends with him, and if anyone makes mean comments, you tell me." "But what if his mom doesn't like me?" Sophia asked, the typical vulnerability of a child shining through. "You talked to her at school yesterday. Did you two fight?" Edward remembered the tension in the air, Sarah's challenging eyes, the way she had stood up to face him despite her advanced pregnancy. "We didn't exactly fight. We had a misunderstanding. But we'll sort it out." "How?" "I'll talk to her properly. Maybe you two can plan a playdate outside of school." Sophia smiled for the first time that morning, completely transforming her serious face. "Really, Dad? Can I invite Ethan to come here?" Edward hesitated, not because of the boy's presence, but because of what it would imply. Sarah Johnson would have to come pick up her son, see the apartment, the involuntary display of his lifestyle. After her reaction at school, he doubted she would approve. "Better to start slow," he said diplomatically. "How about I talk to his mom first about this friendship? Promise you won't ruin everything?" Sophia looked at him seriously. "Because adults sometimes complicate simple things." The observation hit Edward like a punch. At 9 years old, his daughter already perceived how the adult world transformed simplicity into complexity. "I promise I'll try not to complicate," he said, kissing her forehead. Ms. Roberts accompanied Edward to the apartment door minutes later, while Sophia got ready for school. "Mr. Edward," she said, lowering her voice, "can I give an opinion?" Edward nodded. Ms. Roberts was the only person in the world who could speak openly with him. "Sophia needs this friendship. She has never opened up like this with any child." "I know, Ms. Roberts, but the situation is delicate." "Delicate why? Because the boy is poor." Ms. Roberts crossed her arms. "Have you forgotten where you came from?" Edward stopped. Ms. Roberts was one of the few people who knew his complete story. The poor boy from a small town who had built an empire through hard work and some questionable decisions. "I haven't forgotten. But Sarah Johnson, she sees me as just another rich snob. And maybe she's not wrong." "Then show her she's wrong," Ms. Roberts said simply. "Sophia is learning about empathy and true friendship with that boy. Don't let adult pride ruin that." Edward knew Ms. Roberts was right. But as he descended in the private elevator to the underground garage where his BMW awaited him, he couldn't stop thinking about Sarah Johnson sewing late into the night to pay for her son's school, facing prejudice and judgment with her head held high. Maybe there was something he could learn from her too. "Sandra," he said suddenly, "cancel the 3 o'clock meeting. I need to make a visit." "Visit? It's not on your schedule. It's personal. And Sandra, write down the address of St. Teresa Academy. I need to talk to the principal." As he changed course toward the school, Edward wondered when his life had become so predictable that an honest conversation with a woman who was not impressed by his money seemed the most interesting thing that had happened to him in years. Sophia was right. Adults really did complicate simple things. It was time to try to simplify them. The sewing workshop, Stitch and Art, was located on the second floor of a narrow commercial building on Glorious Street in the Garment District. Sarah climbed the 2 flights of stairs, holding tightly to the iron railing, her breath becoming more labored with each step. At 8.5 months pregnant, even the simplest tasks required planning and patience. The familiar sound of sewing machines welcomed her as she opened the frosted glass door. 5 women worked diligently at their stations, each specializing in a different stage: cutting, sewing, finishing, ironing, and embroidery. The space was small but organized, with rolls of fabric stacked on shelves and mannequins scattered in the corners. "Sarah!" Ms. Thompson, the owner of the workshop, looked up from her sarja. She was a 58-year-old woman with dyed golden blonde hair, always tied up in a bun, and magnifying glasses hanging from a chain. "So good you arrived. We have an urgent order." Sarah hung her bag on a hook near her station, noticing the pile of fabrics waiting for her. They were pieces for a boutique at Westfield Mall, silk blouses that needed hand finishing on, Marina asked, already wearing the apron that concealed her prominent belly. "How many pieces?" 40 blouses, for delivery tomorrow morning, Ms. Thompson replied, not stopping her sewing. "The client will pay extra for the urgency," Marina calculated mentally. 40 finely finished blouses meant at least 12 hours of concentrated work. With her advanced pregnancy and Ethan waiting for dinner at home, it would be a long night. "I can stay a bit later," she said, carefully sitting in the chair she had adjusted to accommodate her belly. "Ethan can have dinner at Miss Irene's house." Miss Irene was the neighbor downstairs, a retired woman who occasionally took care of Ethan when Marina needed to work beyond her normal hours. It was an arrangement that worked, but Marina knew she was taking advantage of the elderly woman's kindness. Edna, who worked at the adjacent table, spoke without looking up from the piece she was embroidering. "You shouldn't be pushing yourself so hard. The baby could come at any moment." "Isabella isn't due until June," Marina replied automatically, but felt a familiar twinge in her lower back that made her frown. "We still have a few weeks." "Babies come when they want," murmured Sueli, the oldest in the group. "Especially second pregnancies. They don't give much warning." Marina preferred not to respond. The truth was that she couldn't afford to stop working. The money from overtime was essential to build a small reserve for the first months with the baby. Her maternity leave would be minimal, just the basics guaranteed by law. Her phone rang in her bag. Marina wiped her hands before answering, imagining it was Ethan calling from school. "Hello? Marina? This is Miss Grace from St. Teresa Academy." Marina's heart raced immediately. A call from school was never good news. "Is something wrong with Ethan?" "It's nothing serious," Miss Grace hurried to reassure her. "But there was a small incident during recess. Ethan got into a discussion with some classmates." Marina closed her eyes, feeling a headache forming. What kind of discussion? Apparently some boys were teasing Ethan about social differences. Ethan responded and ended up pushing a classmate. Ethan pushed someone? Marina couldn't hide her surprise. Her son was kind. He never resolved conflicts with violence. "It was more of a shove than actual violence," Miss Grace explained, "but the school has a zero-tolerance policy for physical aggression. Ethan is in the principal's office." Marina looked at the pile of blouses, calculating the lost work hours, the money she would miss out on, but she didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way." "Marina, you don't need to come right now." Miss Thompson protested as she began to take off her apron. "It's just a little school fight." "My son has never had a little fight in his life," Marina replied, grabbing her bag. "If he pushed someone, it's because he reached his limit." The bus ride from the garment district to the Upper East Side had never felt so long. Marina stared out the foggy window, watching the city gradually change, from cramped commercial buildings to elegant houses with well-kept gardens. Each block reminded her of how distant Ethan's world was from that of his classmates. At the academy, Miss Grace greeted her with a reassuring smile. "Ethan is fine," she said, as they walked down the hallway, "but Ms. Helen wants to talk to you." The principal's office seemed smaller, with Ethan sitting in one of the chairs, his legs swinging without touching the ground. He looked up when Marina entered, and she saw a mix of relief and shame on his face. "Mom." "It's okay," Marina said, going straight to hug him. "We'll sort this out." Helen stood up from behind the desk, her face showing genuine concern. "Marina, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Marina settled next to Ethan, noticing how he slightly shrank in the chair. "Ethan, would you like to tell your mom what happened?" Helen asked gently. Ethan looked at his hands before speaking. "I was in the library reading, and Sophia came to talk to me. When we left, Ryan and 2 other boys came to talk to us." "What did they say?" Marina asked, already sensing she wouldn't like the answer. "They asked why Sophia was wasting her time with me," Ethan continued, his voice getting quieter. "Ryan said she only talked to me out of pity because a rich dad teaches his kid to be nice to the poor." Marina felt her blood boil, but kept her expression controlled. "And then? I said it wasn't true, that we were real friends. Then they laughed, And Jake said, Ethan paused, clearly reluctant to continue. You can tell me, son. He said my mom only got me here because she's pregnant and feels sorry for single moms. Marina involuntarily clenched her fists. Helen watched everything in silence, allowing Ethan to tell the story at his own pace. Was that when you pushed? Marina asked. No, Ethan shook his head. I pushed when Ryan said that. He looked at Marina, his eyes filling with tears, that at least now you would have another child to get more scholarships to a good school. Marina felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. The cruelty of children repeating poison they had surely heard from their parents left her momentarily speechless. Ethan did the wrong thing by using physical force. Helen gently intervened. But I understand the provocation he received, and I want you to know that this does not represent the values of our school. What measures will be taken? Marina asked, her voice controlled but firm. Ethan will be suspended for 1 day. It's the protocol for physical aggression, but the other boys will also be punished for bullying, and I will speak personally with their parents. Mom, I'm so sorry, Ethan whispered. I didn't mean to embarrass you. Marina pulled her son into a tight hug, feeling her own tears threatening to fall. You didn't embarrass me, my love. You defended yourself in the only way you knew how. Marina, Helen leaned forward. May I suggest something? Sarah nodded. How about Ethan having some sessions with our school psychologist to work on strategies for dealing with teasing without resorting to physical confrontation? We can't afford private sessions, Sarah said directly. It's part of the school's services, Helen clarified, at no additional cost. Can I suggest something else too? A male voice at the door made them turn. Edward Miller was standing in the entrance, holding Sophia's hand. Mr. Edward, Helen stood up. Sophia wasn't involved in the incident. I know. Edward entered the room, his eyes going straight to Sarah. But Sophia told me what happened, and I would like to speak with Ethan, if Sarah allows. Sarah studied Edward's face, looking for signs of condescension or pity. She found neither. Ethan. Edward knelt in front of the boy's chair, getting to his eye level. Sophia told me that you are friends. Ethan nodded shyly. And she also told me that you are very smart and enjoy reading about stars. I do, Ethan replied, a little more animated. I used to love that when I was your age, Edward said. I lived in the countryside, and at night, without electric light, the stars were our entertainment. Sarah watched the interaction, surprised by Edward's naturalness in speaking with Ethan. Sophia really wants to continue being your friend, Edward continued, and I would also like you both to remain friends, but for that we need you both to learn how to deal with people who say mean things. How? Ethan asked. By ignoring them, because when someone speaks badly of others, they're showing who they really are, and people like that don't deserve our attention. Sophia, who had remained quiet until then, moved closer to Ethan. I told my dad that you are the coolest boy in our class, she said with the typical seriousness of a child, and that I want us to be friends forever. Ethan smiled for the first time since Sarah arrived. I want that too. Edward stood up, turning to Sarah. Can we talk for a minute out there? Sarah hesitated but nodded. They left the room, leaving the children with Helen. In the hallway, Edward got straight to the point. The comments Ethan received are unacceptable, and I will make sure that the responsible parents know about it. How? Ryan is the son of a client of mine. Jake, the son of a supplier. They will hear about respect and manners. Sarah studied him. Why? Why? Do you care? Edward was silent for a moment, as if choosing the right words. Because Sophia smiles when she talks about Ethan, and she hasn't smiled much since she lost her mom. The raw honesty of the answer caught Sarah off guard. And because, Edward continued, those boys are wrong. Ethan has earned his place here, and you, he hesitated, you are raising an extraordinary child. Sarah felt a strange emotion forming in her chest. It wasn't pity in Edward's eyes. It was genuine respect. Thank you, she said simply. Sarah, Edward hesitated again. Can I ask you a personal question? She nodded cautiously. Do you have someone to help you when the baby is born? The question took her by surprise. What do you mean? Someone to take care of Ethan, to take you to the hospital for the first few days. Sarah thought about the reality that awaited her. Giving birth alone, returning to work as quickly as possible, balancing 2 children and financial survival. I'll manage, she replied, the automatic phrase of someone who has always gotten by alone. Edward nodded, but she noticed he didn't seem satisfied with the answer. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to ask. Sarah was about to protest, to say she didn't need help, but something in Edward's sincere tone made her just nod. As they returned to the principal's office, Sarah wondered why a rich and powerful man would care about the problems of a pregnant seamstress, and why, for the first time in years, she didn't feel completely alone in the task of protecting her child. The answer, she suspected, had more to do with the shy girl who had defended Ethan than with Edward Miller himself, but perhaps that was changing too. It was 2 a.m. when Sarah felt the first real contraction. Unlike the practice contractions that had been bothering her for weeks, this one made her double over on the narrow bed she shared with Ethan. The boy was sleeping soundly beside her, oblivious to the drama unfolding. Sarah took a deep breath, counting the seconds until the pain passed. 25 seconds. It wasn't time to panic yet, but her body had decided that Emma wouldn't wait until June as planned. The baby was coming 3 weeks early. Calm down, Sarah, she whispered to herself, resting her hands on her tense belly. You've been through this before. But the first time, 8 years ago, she wasn't alone. She was 19, and Marco was still by her side, nervous but present. Now, at 38, pregnant with the second child of a man who had disappeared the moment he learned of the pregnancy, Sarah faced labor with only Ethan sleeping beside her and Ms. Irene in the apartment below. The second contraction came 15 minutes later, stronger. Sarah looked at the clock. 2:17. Between contractions, she mentally organized what she needed to do. Wake Ms. Irene, call a cab, grab the bag she had packed 2 weeks ago. Ethan would stay with the neighbor until everything was over, but when she tried to get up, a third contraction caught her by surprise, making her gasp loudly enough to wake Ethan. Mom? He sat up in bed, his hair messy and eyes confused. What's wrong? Nothing much, sweetheart. Sarah tried to smile through the pain. Emma has decided she wants to meet the world today. Ethan immediately became alert. Now? But wasn't it just in June? Babies can be in a hurry sometimes, Sarah said, trying to keep her tone light. While leaning on the bed, Marina leaned against the wall. You will stay with Ms. Irene while I go to the hospital. Alone? Ethan's voice carried a concern that was too mature for his 8 years. Sarah hesitated. The truth was yes, she would go alone. She had no one to call, no close relatives in New York City, no intimate friends to wake up in the middle of the night. I'll be fine, she said, more to convince herself than her son. Ethan got out of bed and started putting on a pair of jeans over his pajamas. What are you doing? I'm going with you, he said determinedly. I'm not letting you go alone. Ethan, no. Kids can't go into the maternity ward at night, and the fourth contraction was so intense that Sarah had to lean against the doorframe, gasping. When it passed, she saw Ethan standing in front of her, his eyes filled with tears, but his chin raised in a stubbornness she recognized as her own. Mom, I'm not letting you go alone, he repeated. If I can't go into the hospital, I'll stay in the waiting room, but I'm not staying here not knowing if you're okay." Sarah looked at her son, small, thin, but with a fierce determination in his eyes, and felt her heart tighten. Ethan had grown up too fast, taking on responsibilities he shouldn't have at his age. "All right," she conceded, "but first, let's wake up Ms. Irene. She can take us to the hospital." Ms. Irene answered the door within minutes, wearing a floral robe and flip-flops. At 67, she was a small but energetic lady who had raised 4 children alone after her husband died in a work accident. "Oh my God, Sarah, is it time?" "Already?" She didn't wait for a response, already springing into action. "Ethan, go get your mom's bag. I'll call Kevin." Kevin was Ms. Irene's youngest son, a cab driver who lived in the same building with his wife and 2 children. In 15 minutes, he was at the door with the car, sleepy but helpful. "Don't worry, Miss Sarah. We'll get to the hospital quickly." The trip to the general hospital, where Sarah would give birth through the public health system, was a mix of relief and anxiety. The contractions were now coming every 10 minutes, regular and increasing. Ethan held her hand, softly talking about the stars he saw through the car window, a touching attempt to distract her from the pain. "Mom, look at the morning star." He pointed to a bright spot in the sky that was starting to lighten. "The teacher said it's actually the planet Venus." Sarah smiled despite the approaching contraction. "Really? What else did you learn about planets?" Ethan began to list facts about the solar system, his voice gaining enthusiasm as he spoke. Sarah focused on her son's voice, using it as an anchor while her body prepared to bring Emma into the world. At the hospital, everything happened faster than she expected. The triage, the admission, the pre-labor room where Ethan was forced to stay outside. Sarah saw the look of despair on his face when the doors closed between them. "Take care of Emma for me until I get back, okay?" she shouted through the glass. Ethan nodded vigorously, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. The next 4 hours were a blur of pain, medication, and efficient nurses. Sarah gave birth to Emma at 7:23 a.m. on a Thursday in May, alone in a cold but safe room, holding the hand of a kind nurse named Joan. Emma weighed 6.2 pounds, was rosy and perfect, with a tuft of dark hair like Ethan's. When they placed her on Sarah's chest, the baby opened her huge dark eyes and stared at her as if to say, "So you're the one who will take care of me." "Hi, my beautiful," Sarah whispered, tears finally coming. "I'm sorry you arrived in a complicated world, but I promise there will be so much love." 2 hours later, Sarah was in a shared room with 3 other mothers when a nurse appeared at the door. "Sarah Johnson, you have a visitor." Sarah frowned. She was only expecting Ethan and Ms. Irene. "Who is it?" "A gentleman with a girl. They said they're from your son's school." Sarah didn't need any more explanations. Edward and Sophia had come to the hospital. "Let them in," she said, quickly fixing her hair and pulling her gown to look more presentable. Edward appeared at the door holding Sophia's hand, both carrying bouquets of flowers. He was wearing jeans and a button-up shirt, the first time Sarah had seen him without a suit, while Sophia was in her school uniform. "Sarah," Edward said softly, approaching the bed. "How are you?" "Good, thank you," she replied, surprised by her own emotion at seeing them there. "But how did you know?" "Ethan called the school asking them to let us know you were in the hospital," Sophia explained, stepping closer to the bed to see the baby. "The secretary called Dad." Edward looked uncomfortable, as if he didn't quite know why he was there. "We hope you don't mind our intrusion. Sophia insisted on coming to meet Emma." "Of course I don't mind," Sarah said, and realized it was true. "Where's Ethan?" "In the hallway, talking to a doctor about what babies do in their first days." Edward smiled. "He's too proud to stand still." "Can I see her?" Sophia asked shyly, pointing to Emma, who was sleeping in Sarah's lap. "Sure." Sarah adjusted the baby so Sophia could see better. "Emma, this is Sophia. She's your brother's friend." Sophia looked at the baby with an expression of pure enchantment. "She's so tiny, and she has the same eyes as Ethan." "Do you want to hold her?" Sarah offered. Sophia looked at her dad, who nodded, and carefully extended her arms. Sarah settled Emma into the girl's arms, guiding her on how to support the head. "Hi, Emma," Sophia whispered. "I'm your family friend. I'll teach you how to read when you grow up." Edward watched the scene with an expression that Sarah couldn't decipher. There was tenderness there, but also a deep melancholy. "How are you really feeling?" he asked when Sophia was distracted with the baby. Sarah considered giving the automatic response. "Fine, thank you." But something in Edward's concerned look made her be honest. "Scared," she admitted. "2 kids, no help, going back to work in a few days." "You don't have to go back so soon," Edward said. "Maternity leave. It's just the legal minimum, and I can't afford to go without a paycheck for long." Edward was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, can I make a proposal?" She looked at him suspiciously. "What kind of proposal?" "Ms. Roberts, our housekeeper, has always wanted grandchildren. Sophia needs to learn about responsibility and care, and you need help." "Edward, listen to me," he gently interrupted. "How about Ms. Roberts coming over a few mornings a week to help with Emma? Sophia can come along. It would be good for her to know a real family, not the artificial bubble she lives in." Sarah felt pride and need battling in her chest. "I can't afford a babysitter." "It's not a babysitter, it's extended family." Edward carefully chose his words. "Miss Roberts already told me she would be offended if she charged anything." "Why would they do this for us?" Edward looked at Sophia, still enchanted with Emma, then back at Sarah. "Because you gave us something money can't buy, simplicity, genuine joy." Sophia learned more about friendship and values in 2 months knowing Ethan than in 9 years of sheltered life. Sarah watched Sophia whispering to Emma, seeing how the rich, lonely girl transformed into a caring older sister. "I need to think." "Of course," Edward said, "no pressure, but the offer is there." Ethan appeared at the door at that moment, accompanied by Miss Irene. His eyes went straight to Emma in Sophia's arms. "She's awake," he said, approaching. "Can I hold her again?" Sophia carefully handed the baby to Ethan, who sat in a chair next to the bed. Emma opened her eyes and seemed to study her older brother's face. "Hi, little sis," Ethan whispered. "I'm Ethan, your brother. I'll always protect you." Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears again. Ethan had taken on the role of family protector since he was 5, when their dad abandoned them. Now, at 8, he was promising to take care of another person. "Ethan," Edward approached, "do you want to know a secret about babies?" Ethan looked up, interested. They might not see very well yet, but they recognize voices. "If you talk to Emma every day, she'll always calm down when she hears your voice." "Really?" Ethan looked at his sister with even more affection. "Emma, I'll tell you stories every night, okay?" Watching her son promise care he shouldn't have to give, seeing Sophia discover the sibling love she never had, Sarah made a decision that would change the course of their lives. "Edward," she said quietly, "about your proposal. Can we talk more when I get back home?" Edward smiled, not the controlled smile of a businessman, but something genuine and warm. "We can. And Sarah, congratulations. Emma is beautiful." As they said goodbye, Sarah held her newborn daughter and looked at Ethan, telling Sophia about all the things he would teach Emma when she grew up. As scary as it was to accept help, maybe her family could be bigger than just her and her kids. Maybe, for the first time, They wouldn't have to face the world completely alone. Sarah's apartment in Brooklyn had never received such illustrious visitors. Ms. Roberts was in the tiny kitchen preparing a banana smoothie for Ethan, while Sophia sat on the two-seater sofa, holding Emma with the concentration of someone carrying the most precious treasure in the world. "She's getting heavier," Sophia commented, watching the 2-week-old baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. "And look how strong she holds my finger." Sarah watched the scene from the bedroom, where she was changing clothes after nursing. Through the slightly open door, she could see the transformation that had happened in her home since Ms. Roberts started visiting them 3 times a week. Edward's housekeeper had arrived the first time with a discreet bag of supplies, quality diapers, wipes, imported creams that Sarah could never afford. "Ms. Roberts brought a gift," Ethan shouted from the kitchen, clearly excited. "Ethan, you don't need to shout," Sarah said, appearing in the living room. "Emma is sleeping." "Sorry, Mom." Ethan lowered his voice, but his eyes sparkled. "But it's a really cool gift." Ms. Roberts emerged from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. At 62, she was a woman of strong but welcoming presence, with grey hair always impeccably tied up and calloused hands that revealed decades of dedicated work. "It's not exactly a gift," she said, addressing Sarah. "It's more of a necessity." Sarah frowned. "What kind of necessity?" Ms. Roberts went to her large leather bag and pulled out a shoebox wrapped in plain brown paper. "Open it." Sarah carefully unwrapped it, revealing a pair of genuine leather black women's shoes with a low heel and impeccable finish. They were elegant without being extravagant, clearly expensive but discreet. "Ms. Roberts, I can't accept—" "You can," Ms. Roberts interrupted firmly, "because it's not charity, it's an investment." "What do you mean?" Ms. Roberts sat in the only armchair in the living room, her knees cracking slightly. "Sarah, you have talent. I saw the clothes you make, the way you arrange this small apartment but make it cozy. You have an eye for design that many rich people I know who don't have." Sarah felt uncomfortable with the compliment. "Thank you, but I don't understand." "Mr. Edward is developing a new project, a residential complex for the middle class. He needs someone to create uniforms for the staff, doormen." Sarah sat slowly on the sofa, Emma still in Sophia's arms. "Is he offering a job?" "No," Ms. Roberts shook her head. "He's offering an opportunity. You would create the pieces as a freelancer signing the project. If it works out, it could open doors for other contracts." "And the shoes," Ms. Roberts smiled, "so you feel confident when presenting the project to his investors." Sarah looked at the shoes, then at Ms. Roberts, trying to process the offer. It was a chance to leave the sewing workshop, to work in design as she had always dreamed. But it also meant relying on Edward Miller, and that made her uneasy. "Why would he do this?" Sarah finally asked. "Because he benefits too," Ms. Roberts replied honestly. "He needs someone talented and trustworthy, and because—" She hesitated. "Because Sophia has never been as happy as she has been since she met you." As if she had heard the conversation, Sophia lifted her eyes from the baby. "Ms. Roberts, can I tell Sarah about our plan?" Ms. Roberts nodded. "We want Emma to have a beautiful baby shower," Sophia said enthusiastically. "I've never been to a baby shower, and Dad said we can help organize it." Sarah was alarmed. "Sophia, dear, a baby shower costs money that we don't have." "It wouldn't cost anything," Ms. Roberts hurried to explain. "It would be in Mr. Edward's party room. He never uses it, and it would be a joy to have a celebration there." "And I can make the treats," Sophia added. "Ms. Roberts will teach me." Ethan appeared from the kitchen with the smoothie in hand, clearly having overheard the conversation. "Mom, can I help too? I know how to make brigadeiro." Sarah looked at the 3 hopeful faces. Ms. Roberts with her maternal smile, Sophia with genuine enthusiasm, Ethan with the excitement of someone who rarely had reasons to celebrate. How could she refuse without hurting them? "It's very kind," she said carefully, "but I don't want you to feel obligated." "Sarah," Ms. Roberts leaned forward, her voice becoming more serious, "can I speak a truth?" Sarah nodded. "Sophia lost her mum 3 years ago. Since then, she's been living in a protective bubble that Mr. Edward created out of love, but it's suffocating the girl." Ms. Roberts looked at Sophia, who pretended not to be listening while playing with Emma's tiny fingers. "She needs a real family, with small children, with simple celebrations, with love that doesn't come with money." Sarah felt the weight of the responsibility that Ms. Roberts was placing on her shoulders. "And Ethan," Ms. Roberts continued, "needs to see that not all adults leave, that there are people who stay and help without wanting anything in return." The words hit Sarah like a punch. Ms. Roberts had pinpointed exactly the deepest wounds of both children. "Mr. Edward," Ms. Roberts said more softly, "also needs to remember what it's like to live in a real family. He got lost in work after he became a widower, forgot how to laugh with children, how to care about simple things." "Are you saying we would be helping them as much as they help us?" "I'm saying that family isn't about money or blood," Ms. Roberts replied. "It's about choosing to stay and take care of each other." Emma began to whimper in Sophia's arms. Sarah stood up to take her, but Sophia adjusted to the position Ms. Roberts had taught her and began to rock the baby gently. "It's okay, Emma," Sophia whispered. "Aunt Sophia is here." Sarah felt her heart tighten upon hearing Sophia call herself aunt. The girl had adopted their family with a naturalness that was both touching and revealing of her neediness. "Mum," Ethan approached, still holding the glass of smoothie. "Can I say something?" "You can, sweetheart. I like it when Sophia and Ms. Roberts come here. It feels like our house is more complete." Sarah looked at her son, his honest eyes, his hopeful expression, and made a decision that would change the course of their lives. "All right," she said. "I accept Edward's job offer, and the baby shower too, if you really want to help." Sophia let out a squeal of joy that made Emma jump in her arms. "But," Sarah continued, raising her hand, "with a few conditions." Ms. Roberts nodded, waiting. "I want to work as a professional, not as a charity case. If my work isn't good enough, you tell me. And about the baby shower, I want to contribute something too." "What do you want to do?" Ms. Roberts asked. Sarah thought for a moment. "The cake. I'll make Emma's baby shower cake. It's a recipe from my grandmother from the Midwest. Cornmeal cake with guava paste." Sophia made a face. "Cornmeal?" Ethan laughed. "Sophia, you're going to love it. My mom's cake is the best in the world." "And," Sarah added, looking directly at Ms. Roberts, "I want you to teach me how to make the savory snacks properly. Not just for the party, but for me to learn. It could be useful in the future." Ms. Roberts smiled, a glimmer of approval in her eyes. "Now you're talking like a businesswoman." At that moment, the doorbell rang. Ethan ran to open it, finding Edward at the door. He was carrying a work folder and looked like he had come straight from the office, but his eyes immediately went to Sophia, holding Emma. "Dad!" Sophia exclaimed. "Emma recognized my voice. When she was crying, I spoke, and she stopped right away." Edward entered the small apartment, his eyes quickly scanning the room. Sarah saw when he noticed the new shoes on the coffee table, Ms. Roberts's expression, the atmosphere of decision in the air. "Did something happen?" he asked. Sarah accepted the offer, Ms. Roberts informed with satisfaction, and she agreed to the baby shower too. Edward looked at Sarah, a mix of surprise and something deeper in his eyes. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured." "I don't feel pressured," Sarah replied, and realized it was true. "But I want to work as a professional. Contracts, deadlines." Edward smiled, Not the controlled smile of a businessman, but something genuine and warm. "I wouldn't expect anything less from you." Emma chose that moment to start crying from hunger. Sarah moved closer to pick her up, but Sophia held her so securely that she hesitated. "Can I give her a bottle?" Sophia asked hopefully. Sarah looked at Edward, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "You can. Ms. Roberts will teach you how to warm up the milk." As Ms. Roberts and Sophia headed to the kitchen with Emma, Edward approached Sarah. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Why?" "For allowing us to help. For letting Sophia feel part of a family." Sarah studied his face, seeing beyond the mask of control he usually wore. There was vulnerability, there a deep loneliness she recognized in herself. "Edward," she said impulsively, "why is this so important to you?" He was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. "Because," he finally said, "since my wife died, Sophia and I have lived like two lonely people in the same house. Here she laughs, here she acts like a child." Sarah nodded, understanding. "And you? How do you feel here?" Edward looked around the small apartment, the simple walls, the used but well-kept furniture, the cozy mess of a truly lived-in home. "Like I remember what it's like to have a home," he admitted. From the kitchen came the sounds of Sophia learning to prepare Emma's bottle, with Ms. Roberts patiently guiding her and Ethan offering enthusiastic help. It was the noise of a family functioning, caring for one another. Sarah looked at Edward, this powerful man who had entered her life through a school fight, and realized that perhaps they were both searching for the same thing, a place to truly belong. "Then let's make this work," she said. "All of us." Edward extended his hand, and when Sarah shook it, she felt they were sealing more than a professional agreement. They were choosing to become an unlikely family, built not on blood or marriage, but on the conscious choice to care for one another. And for the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to believe that maybe she didn't have to face the world alone. The makeshift studio that Sarah had set up at the dining table was covered in fabrics, sketches, and sewing samples. For 2 weeks, she had been working on the design for the uniforms for Edward's residential complex, and creativity flowed like it hadn't in a long time. Emma slept in the crib beside her, while Ethan organized the colored pencils by shade, a habit he had developed after seeing how Sarah organized her threads. "Mom, a package arrived," Ethan announced, running in from the door with a box in his hands. The delivery person had climbed the 2 flights of stairs, carrying something that looked heavy. Sarah frowned. She wasn't expecting any delivery. When she opened the box, she found a professional collapsible mannequin with all the pieces perfectly packed and a note on letterhead. "So your creations have the presentation they deserve. E.M." "Wow," Ethan approached, impressed. "It's just like the ones in the store windows." Sarah held the note, a mix of gratitude and irritation forming in her chest. Edward was facilitating her work, but he was also making decisions without consulting her. It was the kind of controlling behavior that bothered her, even when well-intentioned. Her phone rang before she could fully process her feelings. "Sarah? It's Ms. Roberts. I need to talk to you urgently." There was something in the housekeeper's voice that alarmed Sarah. "Is something wrong with Edward? With Sophia?" "Not exactly. Can you come here? Bring Emma. Sophia is eager to see her and, well, it's better if we talk in person." Sarah hesitated. Since Emma's birth, she had only visited Edward's apartment once, a quick and formal visit to discuss project details. The contrast between the two worlds always made her uncomfortable. "Is it urgent?" "It's important," Ms. Roberts corrected. "And Sarah, it might be good for Ethan to stay with Ms. Irene this afternoon." The suggestion set off alarms in Sarah's mind. If Ms. Roberts didn't want Ethan present, it meant the matter was serious. 2 hours later, Sarah was in the private elevator of Edward's building, holding Emma in her arms and trying to control her nerves. The 1-month-old baby wore a simple but clean outfit, and Sarah had chosen a modest dress that she had sewn herself. Miss Roberts opened the door before the doorbell rang, as if she had been waiting inside. "Sarah, I'm glad you came. Sophia's still at school, but she'll be back in an hour." The apartment looked exactly as Sarah remembered. Elegant without being ostentatious, with designer furniture and a stunning view of New York City. But today, there was something different in the air, a tension that hadn't been present during her previous visit. "Where is Edward?" Sarah asked, noticing his absence. "In the office. Meeting that will last until afternoon." Ms. Roberts guided Sarah to the couch in the living room. "It's about him that I need to talk." Sarah sat carefully, adjusting Emma in her lap. "Is something wrong?" Ms. Roberts settled into the armchair across from her, her hands clasped in a way that revealed nervousness. "Sarah, how long have you known Mr. Edward?" "A few months, since Ethan started school." "And what do you know about him?" Sarah considered the question. "That he's a businessman, widowed, father of Sophia, that he came from a humble background and built a successful business." Ms. Roberts nodded slowly. "All true, but it's not the whole truth." "What do you mean?" Ms. Roberts stood up and went to a shelf, retrieving a leather folder. "Mr. Edward asked me to give this to you when the time was right." Sarah frowned. "What time is that?" "When you started to care about him for real," Ms. Roberts said simply, "and when he started to care about you more than he should." Sarah's heart raced. "Ms. Roberts, I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Ms. Roberts returned to the couch, the folder in hand. "You two have been circling around each other for weeks, pretending it's just a friendship because of the kids. But anyone who sees you together knows there's more involved." Sarah felt her face heat up. It was true that she had started to look forward to Edward's visits, where they talked for hours about the project, but also about books, their children, abandoned and rebuilt dreams. It was true that she had begun to dress more carefully on the days he showed up. "Even if there were," Sarah said carefully, "our worlds are very different." "That's why you need to know the truth about his past." Ms. Roberts opened the folder, revealing documents, old photos and newspaper clippings. "Edward wasn't born rich, Sarah, but the path he took to get where he is wasn't always honest." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" Ms. Roberts pulled out a yellowed newspaper clipping dated 15 years ago. The headline read, "Businessman investigated for irregularities in public bidding." "Edward was just starting his company," Ms. Roberts explained. "He was young, ambitious, desperate to escape poverty. When the opportunity arose to participate in a bidding process to build affordable housing." "Did he do something illegal?" Sarah interrupted. "Not exactly illegal, but unethical. He had insider information about the evaluation criteria, obtained through, let's say, questionable relationships." Sarah looked at the newspaper photo. Edward, 20 years younger, with a thinner face and hard eyes she didn't recognize. And then he won the bidding. The money from that first contract was the foundation of the entire empire he built afterward. Ms. Roberts paused. "But the houses he built, Sarah, they were made with low-quality materials. He cut corners to maximize profit." "And?" Ms. Roberts pulled out another document, a technical report. 3 years later, during a heavy rain, 2 of the houses collapsed. An entire family died, Dad, Mum, and 2 small children. Sarah felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Emma stirred in her lap, sensing her mother's tension. Was Edward held responsible? Legally, no. He had met all the minimum technical requirements. But morally, Miss Roberts shook her head. He knew he could do better. He chose not to. Sarah looked at the photo of the family that had died in the newspaper, 2 children smiling at the camera, not much different in age from Ethan and Sophia. Why are you telling me this? Miss Roberts sighed deeply. Because after the tragedy, Edward changed completely. He used the money he earned from that bidding to secretly compensate the victim's family, far beyond what he was legally obligated to do, and since then, every construction he does meets double the quality required by law. Is he trying to redeem himself? He's trying to live with the weight of what he did, Miss Roberts corrected. Sarah, Mr. Edward is not a bad man, but he carries a guilt that will never completely go away. Sarah processed the information, trying to reconcile the Edward she knew, kind to Ethan, protective of Sophia, with the young businessman in the photos who had chosen profit over human lives. Why does he want me to know this? Miss Roberts leaned forward. Because he is falling in love with you, and he doesn't want you to find out by accident or through other people. He wants you to know who he really is before anything more serious happens between you. Sarah felt the world spin slightly. Miss Roberts, I don't know if... Sarah, Miss Roberts gently interrupted, you deserve to know the truth, but you also deserve to know that the man who made those mistakes is not the same man who spent an entire night awake when Emma was born, worried about whether you were okay. He is not the same man who teaches Ethan about astronomy every week, or who listens to Sophia tell the same story about you 10 times without complaining. Emma began to whimper, as if sensing the tension in the air. Sarah automatically rocked her thoughts in turmoil. Does he know you are telling me this today? He knows, and he is terrified, Miss Roberts admitted, because for the first time in 15 years he has found someone who makes him want to be a better man, and he fears that when you learn the truth, you will leave. Sarah looked out the panoramic window, seeing the city stretched to the horizon. Somewhere down below was her modest home, where Ethan was probably doing homework with Miss Irene. 2 worlds so different, and now this revelation complicated everything even more. Sarah, Miss Roberts said softly, can I give you an opinion? Sarah nodded. I have known Mr. Edward since he married his first wife. I saw him make terrible mistakes, and I saw him spend 15 years trying to make up for those mistakes. I saw him shut himself off from the world after he became a widower, and I saw him start to open up again when he met you. Miss Roberts paused, choosing her words carefully. You are not obligated to forgive his past. You are not obligated to accept that people can change. But if you decide to give him a chance, you will find that there is no man more dedicated to doing the right thing than someone who has already done the wrong thing and learned from it. Emma had calmed down, her dark eyes watching her mother's worried face as if trying to understand what was happening. I need to think, Sarah finally said. Of course. But Sarah... Miss Roberts hesitated. Sophia is coming home from school in a few minutes. She is excited because she just learned a new song in choir and wants to sing it for Emma. The implication was clear. Regardless of what Sarah decided about Edward, Sophia could not be punished for it. The girl had genuinely and innocently attached herself to them. I'll stay to hear the song, Sarah decided, but I need time to process all of this. Miss Roberts smiled with relief. That's all he is asking for, time to show who he is. Today, not who he was 15 years ago. When Sophia arrived home from school a few minutes later, her joy at seeing Sarah and Emma filled the apartment in a way that completely contrasted with the seriousness of the earlier conversation. She sang a song about free birds with a sweet and melodic voice, making Emma smile for the first time. Watching the girl, motherless, in need of a true family, Sarah realized that her decision about Edward would affect much more than just her own feelings. There were young hearts involved now, and that changed everything. The first official meeting to present the uniforms would take place on a Thursday at 2 in the afternoon at the headquarters of Miller and Associates. Sarah had spent the previous night checking every detail of the prototypes, adjusting seams, and rehearsing her presentation. The shoes that Ms. Roberts had given her were impeccably polished, and she wore a blazer and skirt set that she had sewn specifically for the occasion, simple, but with cuts that revealed her professional skill. Ethan was at school, Emma with Ms. Roberts at Edward's apartment, and Sarah was heading to the business center with a used leather folder she had bought at a thrift store in the garment district. It was the first time she would step into Edward's professional territory since she learned about his past a week earlier. The glass and steel building of the construction company stood in Midtown. Imposing among other corporate buildings, Sarah announced herself at the white marble reception, trying to ignore the discreet looks from the receptionist who was clearly evaluating her. "Sarah Johnson for a meeting with Mr. Edward," she said, keeping her voice steady. 22nd floor, the young woman replied, handing her a visitor's card. "Elevator to the right." During the ascent, Sarah observed her reflection in the polished elevator mirror. There were dark circles under her eyes. Emma still woke up twice a night for feedings, but her posture was upright, determined. Regardless of her conflicting feelings about Edward, this job represented an opportunity she could not waste. The doors opened, revealing an elegant reception area where a woman in her 40s, dressed in a flawless suit, was waiting for her. "Sarah, I'm Sandra, Mr. Edward's executive assistant. What a pleasure to finally meet you." Sandra was a beautiful woman, with perfectly styled blonde hair and professional makeup. There was a studied cordiality in her approach that immediately put Sarah on alert. "Likewise," Sarah replied, shaking the extended hand. "Mr. Edward is still on an international call, but he shouldn't be long. Can I offer you coffee? Water?" "Water, please." While Sandra fetched the drink, Sarah surveyed the surroundings. Modern paintings on the walls, designer furniture, a panoramic view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything exuded established success and power. "So you are the designer who has captured our CEO's attention," Sandra commented casually, returning with a crystal glass. Sarah felt a pang of discomfort. "I'm the professional hired to create the uniforms for the Hope Residence project." Of course," Sandra smiled, but there was something sharp in her expression. "It's just that people are saying around the office that Mr. Edward has been different lately, happier, more relaxed." "I imagine that's good for business," Sarah replied diplomatically. "Yes, although some investors prefer when he is more focused." Sandra sat in an armchair across from Sarah. "Did you know he was engaged for 2 years after becoming a widower to Monica Barros, heiress of Barros Laboratories?" Sarah didn't know this, but she kept her expression neutral. "Mr. Edward's personal matters are not my concern." "True, I only mentioned it because Monica still attends some social events with us. A charming woman, very suitable for the environment in which Mr. Edward circulates." The insinuation was clear and crude. Sarah was being informed that there was a wealthy ex-fiancé socially appropriate nearby, while she was just a temporarily hired seamstress. "Sandra," Sarah stood up, her voice taking on a cold tone that surprised even herself. "I believe Mr. Edward is free now. I have a professional presentation to make." Sandra blinked, clearly not expecting the direct reaction. "Of course, I'll check." "No need." Edward's voice came from the hallway. He approached with long strides, wearing a charcoal suit that highlighted his blue eyes. But Sarah immediately noticed the tension on his face. "Has Sarah been here long?" "A few minutes," Sarah replied, avoiding his direct gaze. "Sandra, Can you cancel my next meeting? This presentation may take longer than expected. Sandra nodded, but Sarah noticed the flash of irritation that crossed her eyes before the professional mask returned. Edward led Sarah to a meeting room with an elegant glass table and leather chairs. The walls were decorated with photos of previous projects, residential buildings, housing complexes, a shopping centre. "How is Emma?" Edward asked, as Sarah organized her materials. "Well, sleeping better." Sarah maintained a professional yet gentle tone. "And Ethan, how did the math test go?" "He got an A, as always." An awkward silence followed. Edward clearly sensed the distance Sarah was keeping since the conversation with Ms. Roberts. "Sarah," he finally said, "we need to talk about the past." Sarah interrupted, lifting her eyes from the sketches for the first time. "Ms. Roberts told me everything." Edward turned pale. "And how are you feeling about that?" Sarah considered the question honestly. Throughout the week, she had gone through anger, disappointment, confusion, and surprisingly, a reluctant understanding. "Lost," she admitted. "I don't know how to reconcile the man I met with the decisions you made 15 years ago." Edward sat heavily in a chair across from her. "I don't know either sometimes. I wake up every morning remembering that 4 people died because of my greed. And did that make you a better person?" "It made me a person obsessed with never causing harm to anyone again," Edward replied. "Every construction I do now has double the required quality. Every employee earns above the industry standard. Every family that buys an apartment from me has a lifetime maintenance guarantee." Sarah. Emma's feeding schedule was in full swing. Sarah was on the couch in the living room, the baby in her lap, Ethan doing homework at the table when she recognized the school's number on the caller ID. "Sarah, this is Ms. Helen. I need you to come to the school urgently." Sarah's heart raced. "Is something wrong with Ethan?" "Not exactly with Ethan, but there has been an incident, and your presence is necessary." Sarah looked at Emma, who was peacefully sleeping after feeding. "Can I bring the baby?" "Of course. Come as quickly as possible." The journey to the school felt torturous. Ethan had been quieter in recent weeks, more introspective. Sarah had attributed it to normal age adjustment and the changes at home with Emma's arrival. But perhaps something more serious was happening. At the school, Ms. Grace greeted her with a worried expression. "Sarah, Ethan is in the nurse's office. He isn't hurt, but..." "But what?" "It's better for Ms. Helen to explain." In the nurse's office, Sarah found Ethan sitting in a chair, his eyes red and his uniform wrinkled. Upon seeing her, he jumped into her arms, hugging her with desperate strength. "Mom! I'm so sorry. I messed everything up." "Calm down, sweetheart," Sarah soothed him, even as her own heart raced. "Tell me what happened." Ms. Helen appeared at the door, followed by Ms. Roberts and Edward. Sarah felt her stomach tighten at the sight of him, but her concern for Ethan outweighed any personal discomfort. "Sarah," Ms. Helen said gently, "there was a misunderstanding during recess. Some students made comments about your absence from recent school events." Sarah frowned. In recent weeks she had missed the parent-teacher conference and the choir performance, immersed in the work on uniforms and avoiding running into Edward. "What kind of comments?" Ethan pulled slightly away from her arms, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "Ryan said you don't come to school anymore because you're embarrassed." Ethan began, his voice trembling, "that you found out there are really important people here and realized you don't belong." Sarah felt a pang of pain. Indirectly, her own insecurities were affecting her son. "And then?" "I said it wasn't true, that you were busy working. Then Jake said..." Ethan hesitated, glancing quickly at Edward before continuing. "He said everyone knows you and Sophia's dad were dating, but that he got tired and found a rich girlfriend. Sarah felt her blood run cold. How did 8-year-olds know about her situation with Edward? Ethan! Edward stepped closer, his voice heavy with guilt. What else did they say? That Sophia would have to choose between being our friend or continuing to live in the nice house with you, Ethan replied, tears welling up again. And that everyone knows poor people always lose in the end. Sarah looked at Edward, seeing the raw pain in his eyes. He was blaming himself for what had happened. Was that when you got involved in the fight? Ms. Helen asked gently. Ethan shook his head. I didn't get involved, but Sophia heard everything and started crying. Then she yelled at Ryan and Jake, saying they were mean and didn't understand anything about real family. Ms. Roberts made an approving sound. That girl has grit. Where is Sophia now? Sarah asked. In the office, Edward replied. She refused to go back to class after what happened. She said she doesn't want to study at a school where they bully the people she loves. The word loves hit Sarah like a punch. Sophia had really grown attached to them deeply. Miss Helen, Sarah turned to the principal, what measures will be taken? I've already spoken with Ryan and Jake's parents. They will be suspended for 3 days for bullying. But Sarah, Miss Helen hesitated. I need to be honest. The children's comments reflect conversations they've heard at home, and some families are questioning certain friendships that have formed at school. Translating, Edward said in a cutting tone, they're questioning Ethan's presence here. Sarah felt a cold fury take over her. Ethan has earned his place here. Academically, he is among the top 3 in his class. I know that, Miss Helen hurried to clarify, and the school administration fully supports his continued attendance, but I need you to understand that there are external pressures. What kind of pressures? Edward asked, his tone dangerously low. Some important families have threatened to withdraw their children if the school continues mixing social classes irresponsibly. Sarah felt as if she had been slapped. Ethan, who had been listening to everything, shrank even more into her arms. Mom, he whispered, I want to leave this school. Ethan, no. Edward knelt in front of him. You can't let small-minded people make you give up on your dreams. But they're right, Ethan said, tears streaming down his face. We don't belong here, and because of me, Sophia is suffering. Sarah looked at her son, so small, so young to carry these worries, and made a decision. You know what, Ethan? Maybe they are right. Everyone in the room turned to her, surprised. Sarah, Edward began. No, let me speak. Sarah stood up, Ethan still in her arms, Emma starting to stir in her lap. Maybe we really don't belong here, not because we're poor, but because there are people here who think money defines a person's worth. Mom, Ethan protested, just listen to me for a moment, my son. You are smart, brave, and have a good heart. That doesn't change if you study at an expensive school or a public school. What matters is whether you study in a place where you are respected for who you are. Edward stood up as well. Sarah, please don't make a decision on impulse. Sarah glared at him. This isn't impulse, Edward. It's reality. Ever since we got close to your family, Ethan has faced constant prejudice, and she paused, choosing her words. I have been losing myself trying to fit into a life that isn't mine. My friendship isn't about fitting in, Edward said desperately. It's about creating something new together. Is it? Sarah challenged. Then why didn't you tell me about Monica? Why did I find out by chance that there's an ex-fiancé lurking around? Edward paled. Monica is the past. She's the present. She showed up at your office, Edward. And everyone around you. Sandra, the investors, even the parents of this school know that she's more suited to your world than I am. I don't care what those people think. But I do, Sarah exploded, her voice echoing in the small nurse's office. "Because those people are the ones who decide if my son has a place in this school. They're the ones who decide if you can keep important business. They're the ones who judge if I'm good enough to be by your side." Ethan began to cry louder, frightened by the argument. Emma woke up and started to whimper as well. Ms. Roberts approached. "Sarah, please, let's calm down." "No, Ms. Roberts. Calm is what I've been trying to maintain for weeks, and look where it's brought us." Sarah adjusted her 2 children in her arms. "Ethan is leaving this school." "Sarah, no." Edward stepped forward. "Don't let this destroy what we've built." "What we've built?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "Edward, we've built a house of cards, beautiful on the outside, but it collapses at the first gust of wind." "And Sophia?" Edward asked desperately. "Are you going to punish a 9-year-old child who loves you like family?" The question hit Sarah hard. Sophia had truly become part of the family, and the idea of hurting her was painful. "Sophia will always be welcome in our house," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But Ethan will no longer study here. And I—" She looked directly at Edward. "I will keep our relationship strictly professional until the uniform project is finished." Edward looked devastated. "Sarah, please." "My decision is made." Sarah headed for the door. "Helen, thank you for everything. Can Ethan get his materials from the classroom?" "Sarah," Helen stood up, "why don't you sleep on it? Maybe tomorrow." "Tomorrow I will enroll Ethan in a public school near home, one where he is valued for who he is, not tolerated as a favor." Sarah left the nurse's office with her 2 children, leaving a heavy silence behind. In the hallway, she found Sophia leaning against the wall, clearly having heard part of the discussion. "Aunt..." "Sarah!" Sophia ran to her, her eyes red from crying. "Please don't go. I told those boys they were wrong." Sarah knelt down, balancing the children to be at Sophia's height. "Sophia, dear, you didn't do anything wrong. You were brave and defended your family, but sometimes it's better to start over in a new place." "But I don't want to stay here without you," Sophia protested. "This school is boring without Ethan, and who will teach me about plants and stars?" Sarah felt her heart break. "Sophia, you can always visit us. Always. You are part of our family, no matter where Ethan studies." "And what about Dad? Are you still going to be friends?" Sarah looked into the hopeful eyes of the girl and couldn't lie. "I don't know, sweetie. Sometimes adults complicate simple things." Sophia nodded sadly, a premature wisdom in her gaze. "Can I hug you?" Sarah opened her arms, enveloping Sophia, Ethan, and Emma in a collective hug that felt like a goodbye. When they separated, Edward had appeared in the hallway. He watched the scene in silence, his expression heavy with the pain that Sarah tried to ignore. "Sophia," he said softly, "let's go home." Sophia reluctantly nodded, but before leaving, whispered to Ethan, "You are still my best friend, always." Ethan smiled through tears. "You too." Sarah watched father and daughter walk down the hallway, noticing how Edward's shoulders were hunched under the weight of defeat. A part of her wanted to run after them, explain that she wasn't running away from him, but from the impossibility of the situation. But another part, the part that had learned to protect her heart through years of disappointments, knew she was doing the right thing. Some worlds were simply incompatible, and as much as it hurt, it was better to acknowledge that now than to suffer a bigger broken heart in the future. Ethan needed stability, Emma needed security, and Sarah needed a life where she could be herself without apologizing for her background or her dreams, even if that meant giving up what could have been the love of her life. 2 months had passed since Ethan left St. Teresa Academy. Sarah had enrolled her son in Professor Anthony's public school, 2 blocks from home, where he quickly excelled academically and made true friends. Emma was 3 months old, smiling and recognizing voices, bringing joy to the difficult days. The uniform project had been completed and successfully delivered, earning Sarah not only the agreed payment, but 3 new clients referred by Edward, always through intermediaries, respecting the distance she had imposed. Ms. Roberts continued to visit weekly, bringing Sophia, who had adapted to Ethan's new school, picking him up some afternoons to play together. It was a rainy Thursday in August when Sarah received an unexpected call from Helen. "Sarah, I need to talk to you urgently. It's about Edward." Sarah's heart raced. Did something happen? "He's in the hospital. He had a heart attack during a business meeting yesterday. He's stable, but, Sarah, he's asking to speak with you." Sarah sat heavily on the bed, Emma sleeping beside her. "How is Sophia?" "Terrified. Ms. Roberts is with her, but she keeps asking for you. She asks when Ethan and you are going to visit him." Sarah closed her eyes. In the last 2 months, she had managed to keep Edward out of her thoughts during the day, but he always appeared in her dreams. The memories of their conversations, how he treated Ethan, how his... Her eyes lit up when she laughed. "Sarah, are you there?" "I am." "Which hospital?" "General Hospital, ICU, bed 304. After hanging up, Sarah stood still for long minutes, watching the rain hit the window of her apartment. Ethan was at school. Emma was sleeping peacefully. She could pretend that the call never happened, continue living her organized and predictable life. But the image of Sophia, terrified, of Edward alone in a hospital bed, was stronger than her wounded pride. An hour later, Sarah was in the ICU of General Hospital, wearing the navy blue dress she had sewn for special occasions, holding Emma in her arms. The head nurse guided her through the visiting hours and accompanied her to the bed. Edward was pale, connected to monitors that emitted rhythmic beeps. His eyes were closed, and Sarah noticed how he seemed thinner, more fragile than she remembered. As she approached the bed, he slowly opened his eyes. "Sarah." His voice came out hoarse, laden with emotion. "You came. How are you feeling?" "Better now," he said, trying to smile. Can I hold Emma?" Sarah hesitated. Edward was weak, connected to machines. But there was something in his eyes, a desperate need for human contact, for normalcy. "For a few minutes," she agreed, carefully settling the baby in his free arm. Emma looked at Edward with her curious dark eyes, then smiled, one of those toothless grins that melted hearts. Edward began to cry silently. "She has grown so much," he whispered. "And Ethan, how is he doing in the new school?" "Well, happy, made friends, is on the chess team. And you? How's work?" Sarah sat in the chair beside the bed. "I have 3 new clients. Thanks for the referrals." Edward shook his head slightly. "You did it on your own. I just opened a few doors." A comfortable silence followed, broken only by the beeps of the monitors and Emma's soft breathing. "Edward," Sarah finally said, "why did you have the heart attack? Overwork?" Edward looked at the ceiling before answering. "Stress, but not from work, from emptiness. Sarah, after you all left my life, I realized I wasn't living. I was just existing." "Edward, let me speak, please." He turned to her, still holding Emma. "These 2 months made me understand one thing. I would rather be rejected by you for one day than live a lifetime without you. Around." Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. It wasn't rejection, it was self-preservation. "I know. And I know I was cowardly too. I should have confronted Monica publicly. I should have put Sandra in her place. I should have fought harder for us." "Edward, Sarah, the doctor told me the heart attack was a warning, that if I don't change my lifestyle, the next one could be fatal." Edward paused, choosing his words. "And the only change that makes sense to me is having you and the kids in my life. Not as charity, not as favors, as family. Sarah discreetly wiped her tears. And Sophia, how is she dealing with all this? Badly. She blames the school for what happened to us. She doesn't want to study there anymore. You can't make decisions based on anger. It's not anger, Edward interrupted. It's clarity. Sophia doesn't want to study in a school where they don't respect the people she loves. And I don't want to live in a world where I have to hide who really matters to me. Emma began to whimper, and Sarah took her back, gently rocking her. What do you mean? That I'm going to sell the construction company. Sarah nearly dropped Emma. What? I've had a purchase offer for months. An international group interested in my client portfolio and projects. With the money from the sale, I can invest in a smaller company, more focused on social projects. Edward, you can't make a decision like that now. You're on medication. You've gone through trauma. Sarah, for the first time in 15 years, I know exactly what I want to do. Edward tried to sit up better in bed. I want a simple life. I want to wake up in the morning worried about whether Ethan did his homework, if Emma is eating well, if you are happy. And what if I can't give you that? Edward looked directly at her. Then at least I'll try to earn the possibility. The door to the room opened, and Miss Roberts entered, followed by Sophia, and to Sarah's surprise, Ethan. The boy ran straight to the hospital bed. Mr. Edward, Miss Roberts picked me up from school. How are you? Better now, champ. Edward extended his free hand to Ethan. I missed you. I missed you too. And Sophia. Ethan looked at his friend, who remained shy near the door. Hi, Sophia. Hi, Ethan, she replied softly. How's your new school? Cool. They have a science lab, and the teacher said I can help with the experiments. Sophia smiled for the first time since she entered. That's great. Can I come see one day? Ethan looked at Sarah, who nodded. Sure, and I can teach you chess. I learned at the new school. Ms. Roberts approached the bed. How are you feeling, Mr. Edward? Grateful to have you all here, he replied honestly. And determined to make changes in life, I hope, Ms. Roberts said in a maternal yet firm tone. Edward smiled. Very determined. The nurse appeared at the door. Sorry, but visiting hours are over. The patient needs to rest. Can I come back tomorrow? Sophia asked hopefully. Sarah looked at Edward, then at the girl. We can all come back tomorrow if Mr. Edward wants. I do, he said without hesitation. More than anything. As they said goodbye, Edward held Sarah's hand for a moment. Sarah, can I ask you something? Sure. Don't make any important decisions yet about us, about the future. Give me time to get out of here and show that I can be the man you all deserve. Sarah looked at him, pale, vulnerable, but with determination in his eyes, and felt the defenses she had built begin to crumble. Okay, she agreed. But Edward, this once, without lies, without secrets, without people trying to pull us apart. I promise, he said, kissing her hand gently. Leaving the hospital, Sarah walked alongside Ms. Roberts while Ethan and Sophia chatted excitedly about their weekend plans. Emma was peacefully sleeping in the stroller that Ms. Roberts had brought. Ms. Roberts, Ethan suddenly asked, is Mr. Edward going to be okay? Yes, Ethan, he is strong, and now he has very good reasons to take better care of himself. What reasons? Ms. Roberts looked at Sarah, then smiled at Ethan. You, the family he chose to have. Sophia took Ethan's hand. You know what else? Dad said that if I want, I can study at your new school too. Ethan stopped walking, surprised. Really? Really? He said a good school is where there are good people, not where there are rich people. Sarah felt her heart warm. Edward had truly understood the lesson. That night, after putting the kids to bed, Sarah sat in the small living room with Emma in her lap, thinking about the changes ahead. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she wouldn't have to choose between love and dignity. A future where two broken families could come together to form something new and strong. A future where Edward Miller and Sarah Johnson could discover that sometimes opposites not only attract, they complete each other. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to give a second chance to what could be the love of her life. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and if you watched until here, comment, "I watched until here," and leave your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the final screen. It's very exciting.